Hi there, this is Scott Silverman, and today I'm talking with Gary P. Caton, who's going to be giving a workshop for the Florida Atlantic branch of the NCGR, which, as we all know, stands for National Council for Geocosmic Research. And I'm really excited about the workshop that Gary is going to be giving. And let me tell you some of the basic information about that. And to do so, we will have to share screens. First, you need to know that if you want to find out any information or how to pay for it, you can go to this address that's on your screen. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm going to read it to some of our listeners who may be gardening or driving. https://astrology fla.com/event/Gary dash Caton Caton dash retrograde dash loops slash. Now, Gary is a transdisciplinary Hermetic practitioner who integrates diverse traditions and art forms gathered during the course of a full Saturn cycle. He was initiated an astrologer by a magnificent dream in 1993. And yes, Gary, I am reading your words here. He's since become an accomplished counselor, writer, podcaster, teacher, photographer, and mage. Gary is the author of Hermetica Triptycha,
Oh, beautiful. You got it right there. Yeah.
the Mercury elemental year, which we'll be talking about in a little while, and the host of the popular Hermetic Astrology podcast, which I have never actually watched, which I will. And you may connect with him at www.dreamastrologer.com. And it may not be essential, but I have the D in dream and the A in astrologer capitalized.
Yeah. It just gives people because the words kind of run together if you don't create some kind of separation. So,
Yes.
but it's not case sensitive.
All right, good. And here's the information again on your screen for those of you that might want to write it down. I doubt you'll be able to click on it and be connected. Sorry to say. All right.
Saturday, May 17th, 2025.
At 12 noon p.m., but we'd like you to sign in 15 to 20 minutes early to stave off any technical difficulties. Lunch will be from 2 to 2:45. The afternoon session will last from 3 to 5:30-ish. And for more info or any questions you have about the workshop, I encourage you to get in touch with Chris at NCGR Florida Atlantic at gmail.com.
Chris.NCGR Florida Atlantic.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Dot. All right. Let's see. Now, anyone that's ever sat through any of my presentations knows I have Uranus square the sun in midheaven. So
Wow.
computers do love to act up. So let's go over. At first, I kept wondering
Is that
why
a
you
mutable
were,
square?
say it again?
Is that a mutable square?
No, very much
Fixed?
fixed
Ooh,
with
wow.
Antisha.
Oh, nice. Actually, the
and
antithesis takes
and
the edge
and
off
on
of it
the
a
and
little
on
bit.
the angles. Yes.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
So here's more vital esoteric info for Gary. We have his email at Yahoo as well, his Facebook, his Instagram, his Twitter, his podcast, his YouTube channel. All right. You have no excuse not to be stalking him now for the rest of your life, or at least familiarizing yourself with
Easy,
his
big
work.
guy.
And here, the official title of the workshop is Retrograde Loops, Unpacking Retrograde Motion, and It's $55 for non-members and $40 for those who are currently NCGR members. You can purchase your tickets now at the astrologyfla.com address. Zoom links will be sent out on the Thursday before the event.
Excellent.
So I'm going to just read you some more of Gary's copy here so you really understand what you're in for, what you're up against on this Saturday. So one section of the talk will be called or will concern itself with secrets of the retrograde loops. And it's funny, when I think of retrograde loops and the work Gary's doing, I always think of how Coca-Cola was advertised in signs and the loop that would go through the L. And I think there's a very famous Eudora Welty short story where someone is pondering the Coca-Cola sign and looking at where the loops go through the letters of the brand insignia.
Interesting.
My discoveries show that there are 8 basic latitudinal loop shapes potentially traced in the sky by a planet during its retrograde motion, depending on its relationship with its nodal axis. So this lecture will be presenting pioneering research which illustrates planetary nodes, the latitude cycle, and retrograde loops as 3 elements of a unified and novel picture of planetary motion. So we'll be going beyond simplistic pictures derived from a simple dimension of east-west motion along the ecliptic, which we know, of course, is celestial latitude, and moving into understanding and incorporating the vertical dimension of planetary motion known as celestial latitude. And in doing so, we tap tremendous predictive potentials. Now, I'm also addicted to declination, and if I'm going to go vertical, I want to do declination. I want to do vertical antisha. I mean,
Yeah.
we
I,
can have a
I love
lot of
that you brought
fun.
the Antisha in already. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Vertical
So,
dimension is so vital to keep, like if we get in this flat land, I think it just unnecessarily limits our point of view. And that's the whole spirit of this thing is just to open up the vertical dimension. So I love that you're already going there. That's
and
fantastic.
it's great. And I tell you, I'm experimenting and working with altitude in the horizon system because I really believe that's a predictive piece that no
Yeah, the
one has
most
spent enough
elevated planet
time.
in a chart, 100%. The most elevated planet in a chart is usually a big deal. It's a thing to keep an eye
And,
on. It
and
may not even be near the midheaven, you know?
and look, and there are the altitude versions of contraparallels, right? Plus 30, minus 30, 2 planets that are, in a partile opposition by altitude. I can't believe this isn't telling us something.
I
Okay.
love it. You're a man after my own heart.
Okay, first question. What does the P stand for in your name?
Preston.
Preston. I see. I was sure it was Peter. Oh my God, I'm already.
Yeah, no, Preston. And Preston itself stands for priest town.
Yes.
So so if you take the word Gary, which the root is gar, meaning spear, essentially, right? Spear.
Hmm.
So soldier, Gary essentially means soldier. Soldier from a priest town. So soldier of the church. So it's kind of like an old sort of what do you call those guys with the red crosses on their shields? The Templars.
Crusaders.
Yeah, or yeah,
Knights Templar. Right.
yeah. Maybe it's maybe it's a sign I was a Templar knight or something in a past life.
Well, that begs the question. I kind of think all time is going on simultaneously. So,
Okay, well, maybe
well,
I am a Templar knight in another life.
right now, a parallel life. Okay. What is a transdisciplinary Hermetic practitioner? And can
Right.
we all become one?
100%. Yeah, yeah, no. So a Hermetic practitioner is a practitioner of Hermetic arts, of which there are three. Astrology is one, and then you have also alchemy and magic. So, and these are what are known in Hermetics as the three parts of the wisdom of the whole universe. And so, what that's the main thing that why I don't simply call myself an astrologer because that's actually quite limited. There's three arts in Hermetics, and the transdisciplinary part means that I cross disciplines. I do historical research. I am also a trained counselor. So I'm not a psychological astrologer. I'm not a research astrologer. Although I was trained in Hellenistic astrology and I can do a nice Hellenistic workup, I'm not a traditional astrologer. Mainly also because to me, tradition is actually the astrology you do with your face. So I call like visual, like going out this morning when I was looking at Saturn and Venus rising over the New River mists, that's traditional astrology to me. Classical astrology would be like the Hellenistic. And so transdisciplinary is just a way of saying like I do it all kind of. The only thing I really don't do is I'm not a an orary practitioner. And that's not that it's not for any reason really other than there's plenty of people doing it. So I just don't, I haven't really, but other than that, there's not a lot in the astrology world that I haven't done. And so that's what the transdiscipline, it means I've been around the block a few
To
times.
each according to their abilities. And what about astrocartography? Did you have a little period where you became obsessed with locality?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, man. I have done that since about 2010 now. So 15 years of and getting up early, super early, oh dark 30, getting dressed, getting in the truck, driving to these locations, hiking up the side of a mountain in the cold and the dark. I've put in a lot of time to try to share these experiences of like, oh, there's a comet in the sky right now, and not everybody is going to be able to see that. And I want people because to me, the soul of astrology is in the sky. And that just seems so obvious. And so I want to encourage people
In the
to,
sky, not in
yeah,
looking at stellarium on your
exactly,
laptop screen. We're going to get there. Now, what's all
exactly.
this about a dream initiation that happened in
Right. So I
1993?
became an astrologer through a dream. I had begun studying tarot and practicing tarot. I had been homeless by on design, by on purpose for several years.
Were you
And I
living
came
in your
back.
car or in your truck?
No, I was a leather tramp, bro. I wasn't a rubber tramp. I was a leather tramp. I was hitchhiking around for several years. So yeah, some rubber tramping, but not my rubber. Not yet, anyway. And I got back to the East Coast and I got settled for the first time in several years, and I began to have a series of really vivid dreams. And in the final one, I'm lying on my back in a field of green grass, and I'm looking up at the sun, and I can look right at it. It's not hurting my eyes, it's not blinding me, and I'm like, wow. So I'm checking it out, and in the midst of the solar disk, there was the symbol for Venus, and I just was blown away by that, and I knew that there was like this was a message from who, what, I don't know, but I know that I trust this more than any academic curriculum, which is how I became homeless. I just kind of left school and went out to see the world. And so I knew instinctively that I trusted this, and I knew instinctively that it had to mean something. And so one of my trips to the used bookstore on Fridays, if I had an extra $5, I'd go to the used bookstore, and I asked the guy, is there any way for me to know when Venus and the sun were together in the sky? And he goes, yeah, yeah. And he shows me this old blue Rosicrucian ephemeris, and it was 100 year. One of those, you ever seen one of those? The
Yep.
really thick ones?
With
So,
the
okay.
declination on every
Yep.
page. Love it. Yeah.
So I got that and I went home and I started to decipher it and I found, okay, so this means the sun was here. So this means the Venus was here. Holy shit. On the night that I had that dream, there was an inferior conjunction of the sun and Venus. And so I was literally in my dream seeing the sky, which you actually can't see a conjunction of Venus and the sun unless it's a transit of Venus. And even then, only with
Across the surface of the sun.
a
Yeah.
filter, right? Or whatever. And so, so yeah, it kind of did involve some melatonin. And yes, I'm quite sure that Hermes was on hand. And yeah, I did. It's not that I cast the chart for the dream. I kind of, I didn't, know like what time of night that it had. I didn't note the time when I got up. So it wasn't that so much that I cast the chart. It was that well, I cast sort of like what you might call the whole sign chart. Like I just
Right.
found out, and that was it for me. I was hooked, and so for the next several years, I was living in a house with no electricity. By the way, so and just eating what I grew and whatever, and so I would sit with a candle at night flipping through the pages of that ephemeris trying to figure out like what the hell I had got
So
myself
you were like
into.
one of Anne Rice's vampires, in Interview with the Vampire, the first book, right? The candles burning, the books stacked everywhere, right?
Yeah,
Yep, yep.
yeah.
How great.
Basically, the upward Z is when Venus is crossing her north node. The downward Z is when she's crossing her south node. And it turns out not only is it true for Venus, it's true for the rest of the planets. So, for instance, during the pandemic, and I gave this talk that I'm going to give to Astrology South Florida. I gave this talk at UAC 18 in Chicago. And I said at UAC 18 in Chicago, the last time that Jupiter did this downward Z at its south node in Capricorn, there was a stock market crash. So does that mean in 2020 there's going to be another stock market crash? Like I gave a forecast. Do you know, dude, it was within 1 day of the exact contact of Jupiter crossing the ecliptic, the day after, that's when the COVID crash happened.
Amazing. And you're talking the Jupiter crash, are you talking about 2008, September?
Yeah, there was a crash in
Yep.
2008, and that was Jupiter crossing its south. And then 12 years later, right, there's another. And I said in 2018, it's possible. It was a forecast, it wasn't a prediction.
Right.
I was so, but the forecast came true, and it was literally timed to 1 day. Now, imagine if I had known what the hell I was doing and I shorted the stock market. You know what I'm saying? I
You
mean,
would have four trucks. Yes.
exactly.
So you're going to teach people at the workshop how to draw the loops, and are you going to also go, people that aren't familiar with planetary nodes, will you be explaining to them what
Yeah.
they are and whether to, so people get very confused because do they do heliocentric nodes? Do they do terrestrial nodes,
Geocentric, yeah. Yeah,
and then
there's
not all software programs. So you're going to demystify nodes in the workshop, basically speaking.
100%. Yeah.
And I just wanted to mention you'll be putting varied examples from birth charts, political elections, noted economic booms and busts, and sporting contests. Now, are some of the booms and busts you're going to look at, are they international or are they all centered
Well,
around
like
the
for
US?
instance, that was a global bust
Right.
in the COVID thing.
Oh
And
boy.
there was Saturn was crossing its node at the same time as Jupiter. That's why that one was so powerful. So yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that. And then there's also this plays into the Bitcoin chart. So for people who may be crypto enthusiasts, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So there's just a variety of things. I have an
Awesome.
example when Peyton Manning won his second Super Bowl. There's a really interesting example from that. I'm trying to think what other examples I have. But yeah, I like to throw different things out there because not everybody gives a crap about the stock market or
Right. Or Peyton
Bitcoin.
Manning.
Or
Yeah.
exactly. And so you kind of throw a variety of things out there and everybody will get a little taste of something that they like, you know?
Now, I hate myself for this. I just have to mention Roxana Muse and the shadow of Mercury retrograde. Could you contain yourself to like 4 or 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want to say something. It builds humility, right? When people die in our global community now, within 4 or 5 years, new astrologers don't really know who they are. So
Yeah.
for those of us in this room full of this Zoom room full of veteran astrologers, many of us know that Roxana Muse was the person that first wrote about and came up originally with the whole concept of the shadow of Mercury retrograde. It caught on so fast that many people just thought it was, you
Always
know,
there.
always there, ancient
Yeah.
wisdom. So I was trying to find us a picture of Roxana, and
Nice.
she's only been gone 5 or 6 years. This was the one picture I
Wow.
could find on the internet. There used to be many more, and
There's
that's Carol.
David, right?
There's
Is that
Carol
David
Tebb.
Cochran
There's
and
David.
Giselle?
That's yep. And
Giselle, Ray Merriman.
yep. So this is
Wow.
an ISAR group. Why was this picture online? Because everyone in this picture headed ISAR at some point, right? So
Ah, wow. I did not know that about
yeah.
Roxanne.
So anyway,
Wow.
but so I'm just putting this in context. It would amaze Roxana that people would correct her or start telling her about the shadow of Mercury retrograde. So whatever you feel about this theory, and it does seem to hold up in certain situations. I know you have very strong opinions about this.
I do. And so now here so look, I think I don't know and I would love to have had this conversation, but I'm guessing that where this theory comes from is that, in her client work, people would report experiences of they would report retrograde like experiences before the retrograde happened and after.
So like mechanical things breaking
Yeah, weird shit.
down,
Like, wait, you said Mercury retrograde wasn't until next week, but it's already freaking me out.
scheduling mix-ups.
What the
Yep.
hell's going on, Roxana? Now, so how the hell do we explain that? I think this was her way of explaining that. And so, in that sense, I actually think it's admirable. And why? Because the client's experience is reality, right? You can't say, no, no, no. Like one way somebody could have dealt with that is said, no, no, no. You're being crazy. Mercury's not retrograde. That doesn't have to do with Mercury retrograde. You could have like tried to make the astrology the truth and the person's experience got denied. That would have been a really bad way of handling it, but it happens. We get caught up in thinking we're the arbiters of truth. And so in that way, I think that what she was doing was a very honorable and wonderful attempt to explain people's experience. Um, the
But that
problem,
said, that said, do you think
yeah,
it's being abused in our postmodern
yeah, the problem
astrology
that the
world?
problem that I have with it is that, there becomes this quality of don't do this, that, or the other during the retrograde, and then that gets extended to the shadows. And guess what? That's half your life. If you extend the shadows and you're saying don't do this, that, or the other, half your life goes by and you can't do this, that, or the other. I can't live like that,
And
dude.
it's not just Mercury. People do these rules for
Oh
Venus
my God,
retrograde, Mars retrograde.
if
Right.
you
Yeah.
start doing the deal with other planets, it extends out even more. Especially when you get out towards the outer planets, it's literally like always in the shadow, you know? And so that was my main thing is like, no, look, I'm not going to stop living just because of some shadow, and when I started understanding these loops, what what I've learned is that you can't just uniformly paste the same shadow on each end of every single retrograde because what I think is driving the experience of pre-retrograde and post-retrograde change is that this is when the planet changes in the latitude extremely quickly. There's a lot of actual measurable change happening in the vertical dimension of a planet's motion before and after the actual retrograde. But in some loops, it'll be more towards the front end. So the pre-retrograde will be very volatile, whereas the post-retrograde, it's just cruising along kind of normal. And so if you were to paste the pre and post-retrograde shadow and treat them the same, that wouldn't actually fit with the reality of the planet's motion. And so ultimately, what I've said about this is that it's an admirable attempt to explain human experience. But ultimately, simpler theories are better. And the simplest theory is that the actual movement of the planet is what's driving the human experience. And the actual movement of the planet changes quite a bit before and after the retrograde, but it's not always the same. Sometimes it's more before, sometimes it's more after, and sometimes it's mainly during the retrograde, and that before and after are kind of normal. So the amount of shadow, the kind of shadow is very different for each different kind of retrograde. And so it's a lot more complex than it appears to be when if we just do this simple pasting shadows before and after the retrograde
This
thing.
sounds like book 4 of the triptych. So
Yeah.
book 3A. Do
Yeah,
you
this is the
when you try to explain this to people, do you encounter surprising resistance?
yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, because they instinctively know that that there's something true about it, and they instinctively feel me saying that it's not true. But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a better way to do it.
It's true, but not for the reason you think it's true.
100%,
Yeah.
and not in the way you think it is either. It's absolutely true, but there's a better way to do it, and that will a serve to educate people about what actual planetary motion is and thus make the art better. And B, it will probably yield you better results in the end because you'll know, like, oh, wow. Like, literally, when you watch these loops, it looks like so Mercury will go way up and then boom, it's falling off the edge of a cliff, or you're at
Uh,
the place where the roller coaster goes zoom. Like, that's the probably the place where I want to watch during, like, you can actually zoom in right on the time where that's when the place where I'm going to expect things to be volatile, and on the other end it just kind of smooths out. And so it to me it just makes a lot more sense to dial in. And but hey, I'm a Virgo moon, so what are you gonna
what
expect?
are you going to do? You're going to take a lot of showers. That's what you're going to do. More than most people. Um, I also want to reassure those of you who have been sort of following this conversation as you're doing something else. These concepts are graspable, are easy to grasp, since I can't say that word, and
Yeah,
simple. And don't be intimidated
yeah.
because there's some astronomy
Yeah, no, we're going to
mixed
break
up
it down. I'm
there.
going to make it easy for everybody. I've been doing it long enough now that I've got it pretty
You,
distilled.
here's the information once again. I will be there for the first 2 hours. I have a scheduling conflict at 2 p.m., so I'll be watching the recording like many other people. And Gary, thank you so much
Thank you, Scott. It's
for
wonderful to hang out, man. Yeah.
yeah, it's really fun and probably
Thanks for
more
all the
fun for us.
pictures and all the yeah, like it feels like community, like what we're doing here, and that's awesome. That's one of the and NCGR was my entry point into the community, by the way. I want to say that, like, the fact that they have local chapters for people to show up and meet folks like you and the folks that hold down these local chapters, I have tremendous respect for what they're doing. And so the fact that y'all have a chapter to be a member of is such an enormous blessing. And of course, it's a wonderful blessing for me too. And so thank you very much for uh, letting me share my stuff with your community. And thank you, NCGR, for, holding space for these chapters for so many years